When Jesus was on this earth calling people to follow him, he said, "Follow me and I will make you fishers of men." Before he ascended to heaven, he commissioned them and us to go and share the gospel with everyone. One of the ways I love to begin to share the gospel message with a friend is by telling them how the gospel has radically changed my life. And that's what I want to share with you today, my Jesus story. Now, parents, if you have little ones watching, I'd encourage you to watch this first and then decide if you want them to hear this whole story. So here goes. I was just 4 years old when I knelt by my parents' bed with my mom and prayed to ask Jesus to come into my heart. Even though I was only 4, I'm pretty sure I had a basic understanding of the truth of the gospel, and I really loved Jesus. I remember roller skating around our basement, singing songs of praise to God that I had learned at church. I remember my mom teaching me the books of the Bible songs, and I remember singing them over and over again at the age of 5.
Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers.
Yep, that's me. I remember loving going to church. That was until I got to middle school. Then I didn't like church very much at all. You see, every adult there seemed to have bluish-white hair, which I think is precious now, but I didn't at the time. Sitting through the pastor's sermon that I had no clue what it meant or how it applied to my life seemed like a weekly torture treatment. My poor mom would drag my brother and me there every week, and we would always put up this big fight. Why doesn't Dad have to go? How come he gets to sleep in? I hated it more and more, and I actually resented my mom for making us go. You see, this is how things worked in my family. My poor mom, she was the disciplinarian who tried her best to turn my brother and me into responsible contributors to society. And my dad was the fun guy. Mom made us do our homework. Dad said, "Forget the homework. Let's go outside and play." Mom tried to get us to see how much we had, and she lectured us about needs versus wants. Dad would spoil us rotten by giving us whatever we asked for. Mom made us go to boring church. Dad didn't. Mom was a Christian. Dad was not. So in my very self-centered 6th grade mind, it boiled down to this. Dad was fun, and Mom and her God were not. Dad loved me the way this selfish girl wanted to be loved. Mom and her God did not. Mom was in charge and Dad was not, and that made me mad. Now, it wasn't just Mom and her God that made me mad. For whatever reason, I felt angry inside a lot. I can't even give you a good explanation as to why. But in my anger, I was a mean bully to many kids in my class. Then my anger toward my mom and her God only escalated in junior high to the point where one day I was so angry that I slammed the door to my bedroom and I began to cuss God out. I told him that I hated him and that it was just an ignorant 4-year-old mistake to ever ask him into my life. Then I said, "God, get out of my life. I hate you and I never want to have anything to do with you. And if I ever ask you to come back into my life again, don't listen to me and don't you dare come back because I will not have meant it." It was only by grace, I think, that I wasn't struck by lightning at that moment. So that was my life in 6th through 9th grade. Turn my back completely on God, count down the days when I'd be out of the house and not have to obey my mom anymore, beat up some classmates either physically or verbally, and take out my aggression by being the tough girl in sports. And then came my sophomore year in high school. I still hated church and I was still angry inside. But when one of my classmates asked me if I would want to go with him one Wednesday night to his church's youth group 3 towns over, I said, sure. You see, when you grow up in a very small cornfield town where there were only 32 kids in your class, The thought of going to potentially meet some cute guys at a social event in a much bigger town will make you say yes right away, even if it was a church event. I remember the first time I went. The group didn't actually meet in the church due to space issues. We met in a remodeled chicken coop on one of the church members' properties. I, of course, don't remember what the youth pastor preached about that first night or many nights after that, but I remember that even though it was churchy, I didn't hate it. And I made friends who seemed to love God, and that motivated me to keep going. My mom actually started going to that church on Sundays, too. The pastor there actually made sense to me. I actually started listening to a few things he was saying, and I found myself thinking about what he said during the week. Time passed, and I was going to church once or twice a week, mainly to hang out with friends. But then things got more intense. It was my junior year in high school. Now, junior year was when the pressure was turned up to figure out what you are going to do with your life. Do I take more college-bound classes? Which colleges would I apply to? And what would I study in college? What do I want to be the rest of my life? So I started to fast forward my life. Okay, my best friend Ann and I can go to UCLA. We could get jobs as lifeguards while in school. Maybe I could get a basketball scholarship. I'll study psychology. Yeah. Help people. That would be nice. I'll get married. I'll have a couple of kids. And then what? Become a grandma? Get old? Die? That's it? That's all there is to life? That's my big purpose? I couldn't get the futility of it out of my mind. I walked around for weeks thinking, really? That's it? Even picturing myself being filthy rich and having the perfect husband and the perfect beautiful children, I still thought, that's it? There must be more. And that's when God kept coming back to my mind. Yeah, the same God I gave my 4-year-old life to. The God that I had been listening to sermons about for the past year. The God that I didn't hate anymore. I couldn't get him out of my mind. Surely he had more for us. I mean, more than go to college, get married, have kids, get old, and die. I started to remember the sermons that I had heard about having eternal life, an abundant life, about him having a plan and a purpose for us that even outlasts life here on earth. And I knew it was all true, and I was so sure of it. And now I wanted it more than ever, but this was the same God I had cussed out in junior high. I had specifically told him that I never, ever would want him back in my life, and that if I ever asked him back in, I had told him, don't you dare believe me, because it would all be a big lie. I sunk into a deep depression. I was sure I had committed an unforgivable sin against God, and that I had thrown away my only chance at having true purpose and peace. I was sure that he had created me to be in relationship with him, but I had blown it. I remember trying to pray on many occasions, Lord, please forgive me. I'm so sorry. Please take me back. But my own heart accused me. Remember what you said? Remember you said you wouldn't mean it. Even if he wanted to forgive you, he won't, because you told him not to believe you. This went on for months. And since I felt like I had killed my only hope at having meaning in life, I mistakenly came to the conclusion that it would be best to end my life. But the very night I intended to end it, I couldn't get the questions out of my mind. Truths I had learned all those years my poor mom had drugged me to church. What if the Bible is true and heaven and hell are real? What if I end up in hell, which I've been told is worse than this depression I'm experiencing? And what if God would actually forgive me and take me back? The doubt was enough to make me call the pastor of the church we were going to. I was actually able to meet with him the very next day. And even though I was unable to convince myself for the 6 or so months before that day that God would take me back, when my pastor said that God would forgive me and take me back, it rung true. I knew he was right. He assured me that I had not committed some unpardonable sin and that God was there, arms open wide, to restore my relationship with him and to start a new life, living on purpose. And it was a new life. My depression was completely gone, and my heart and mind were filled with incredible hope. Now, I wasn't immediately given a specific answer to the nagging question I had had, like where am I supposed to go to college and what am I supposed to do in life? But what I found was those weren't even the most important questions anymore. The really important questions, along with their answers, moved to the top. Questions like, why do I really exist? To have eternal friendship with the God who created me and created the whole world. Or questions like, who loves me and pursues me even when I totally reject him? My heavenly dad. He showed it when he sent his son to die on a cross and provide forgiveness for people like me who had hated him. Or questions like, how can I experience inner peace, hope, and joy? Through letting the one who made me love me, forgive me, guide me, and rule in my life. That was quite a few years ago. Have there been times in these quite a few years that I didn't experience perfect peace and joy because sad or painful things happened that seemed to have no explanation? Sure. There are things that happen in this broken world that our finite minds can't explain. But since that day that I accepted God's forgiveness, my heart has been one of peace, hope, and joy. And it's because I know I have friendship with my Creator today, in this life on earth, and someday also in heaven with Him. So that's my Jesus story. I know you have one too. And like I mentioned, one of the best ways to begin to share the gospel with a friend is by telling them how the gospel has changed your life. Now, I add and subtract some of the details depending on who is listening or depending on how much time I might have to share. Have you been sharing your Jesus story? Do you feel really confident in how you're sharing it? I offer various tips for sharing your story in part 2 of the resource I'm working on called How to Share the Good News. Just join my fun group of email friends by signing up in the box at the right sidebar of my website, and you'll have instant access to it. Thank you so much for tuning in, and hey, how about sharing your story with at least one person this week? Do it. You'll be glad you did.